Hello, my name is Beck, and I have put down a lot of books this year because I was like, I don't like these. So without further ado, I'm going to revisit each month during the year and let you know which books I DNF'd. The first one is by an author that I've really enjoyed reading from before, but this book didn't really hit the right tone for me. And that title is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. I loved the 5th season trilogy. I enjoyed The City We Became, but I've not decided to continue that series just because it doesn't really feel palatable to me. And then the world building and the character in this one was just not sticking for me, so I ended up putting it down. All of these DNFs, by the way, I've talked about in each monthly wrap-up, so I will link my wrap-ups playlist below just in case you want to listen to my more up-to-date thoughts, because obviously throughout the entire year I've read ahead and I've kind of forgotten a whole bunch of stuff about these books. I've just got the titles, so if you want more details in context, I've got a playlist. But unfortunately I DNF'd this book. I wanted it to be good, and I thought, you know what, I've got the physical book as well as the audiobook, maybe I'll try the physical book. It was the same, so I've gotten rid of it now, unfortunately. Then I put down a very classic science fiction, and that is because I found out that the author of these books would assault people when he went to conventions, and that is Foundation by Isaac Asimov. He would sexually assault women when he would grab them at conventions when they'd come and get their books signed by him. And I was like, you know, I do not want to support an author that has done these things. And so I'm getting rid of this book. And that was the end of that. To be honest, the writing also felt quite dry because I just started it and I thought, oh, maybe I should stick with it. And then I Googled it and I was like, actually, no, I shouldn't. And I got rid of it. And then there's another author that I really enjoyed, and she does the audiobooks herself because she's an audiobook narrator by trade. Obviously, she's a writer as well, and she joins Brandon Sanderson quite often on his Writing Excuses podcast. But I wanted to like this book, but it deviated from the format of the first two, and I won't explain why because it's book 3. And this is called The Relentless Moon by Mary Robinette Kowal. It was fine and I liked her narration, but I was just not captured by the story, and I got 3 hours into the audiobook and I thought, I'm really not interested in continuing to read this. You know, when you're just putting a book down and there's no motivation whatsoever to go back to it, even though your day-to-day schedule isn't super stressful or busy, you just don't really think about the book. That's a sign to me that I'm kind of passively deciding to DNF it already, and I've become better at picking that up during the year. I found DNFing initially really hard to do because I'm like, I do not want to not finish this book. Like, I want to give it a decent shot. I want to get to the end. I want to have a fully realized opinion. Your opinion is going to be fully realized. You make a decision and that's your opinion. So I need to just put books down, even if I feel like I'm kind of mildly enjoying them. If I'm not loving them, why am I bothering? I ended up putting this down because it was kind of middle of the road for me, and I'm like, I don't want to waste time when I could be listening to something else that I could absolutely adore. So I stopped this one too. And then in February I DNF'd one book, and that was by Matt Haig. It is quite a popular release called The Humans, and it's about an alien who comes to Earth disguised as, I think, a guy who's died and then the alien's taken over his body, or he's disguised as a dog. I honestly could not tell you because I got 6 pages into this and the style of the writing felt very condescending. It probably wasn't necessarily meant to be, but that's the way that I was interpreting it, and I couldn't unsee it once I'd noticed. So I was like, I'm done. And then in March, I put down 4 books. So the first book I did not finish is Daughter of the Deep by Rick Riordan, another author that I was like, I love this author. I love his writing. Percy Jackson rocks. I'm going to try something else that he's written. And Daughter of the Deep just was not it for me. I got 20% through this, and I also did the audiobook. And at this point, if I was watching this video, I'd be like, Beck, do you have a problem with audiobooks? You clearly are not just vibing with the ones you pick up. Are you an audiobook person? I would say yes, I'm a very big audiobook person, but sometimes they're just not for me. And like the N.K. Jemisin book, sometimes I tried books physically as well as the audiobook, and I was like, no, it's definitely the tone, it's definitely the style that is the problem, and that's why I'm putting it down. And this didn't feel very cohesive. It felt very busy as well, and I was trying to get like latched into the story, but a lot of things kept chopping and changing. And I get that for action, you have to chop and change things to make it seem quick and interesting. But if I don't care about anybody yet, because I've only just begun the book, I don't care about whether they're going to live or die. It's just spectacle. It's not interesting. So I stopped reading this too. Unfortunately, I also put down a popular fantasy author, and that is Jim Butcher. Not the Dresden Files, don't panic. I love the Dresden Files. However, I put down Furies of Calderon, which is the first book in his high fantasy fantasy series, and this has been compared to Digimon set in a fantasy world, and that's kind of because you are kin with these creatures called Furies, and they're kind of elementals, and so you get a combo of their magic if you bond with one. But the way that this was written, the main character, and I don't even remember his name anymore, the male gaze in here was so strong that all of the characters just felt very tainted, and I was just getting very frustrated by it. And so I thought, why am I reading this if I'm just getting frustrated? I know he's got brilliant tone with Dresden. I know that I laugh out loud. I get super emotional. I love Dresden so much. So if this is not it for me, it is not it for me, and I need to just give it up. Then I tried a nonfiction, much to my optimism, because I don't read nonfiction. And sure enough, I was like, I'm putting this down too. And I didn't finish Chasing the Scream, which is kind of the history on war on drugs and how all of their stigma started to come to a head, and how a lot of it was just kind of fabricated by one guy who had some kind of bee in his bonnet about one decision. So it was interesting conceptually, and I would probably watch a documentary on it, but to read it, it was very boring. It was like reading a textbook. I just don't care for nonfiction, and in this case, it just felt very dry. So I was like, it's not happening. And then another popular book, but this time a romance, and that is The Love Hypothesis. I found the characters in this book absolutely intolerable, and so I put it down because, oh my goodness, I could not stand them. And then moving on to April, I put down The Book of Coley, which is a apocalyptic book. And you know me, I love fantasy and post-apocalyptic books and science fiction, and I was like, I'm gonna love this post-apocalyptic book. It seemed to have a character that was in this community, and he's not supposed to go beyond the gates for whatever reason, and because the story has to progress, the inciting action is him going past the gates. But it was, again, the tone of this book just killed it for me, and I thought, I'm not interested at all. And I probably gave it like maybe 4 or 5 pages. I know pretty quickly whether I'm going to be able to put up with a book enough to stay for the hook, or whether I just don't want to read it. Like, I've made that choice pretty rapidly, and the more you practice doing it, the better you get. And then, because I'm really stupid, I was like, a Brandon Sanderson novella that I haven't read, Sixth of Dusk. I'm going to read that. And then I put it in a readathon TBR for something, and I was like, why is this familiar? I have read it. So I'm going to DNF it because it won't count to this readathon that I'm doing, and read something else. So it's not that the book was bad. It was just because I did a silly thing and revisited a book that I didn't want to read at the time and I thought I hadn't read. To be fair, those books, I think, are the novellas that make up the compendium for Arcanum Unbounded, which is a collection of books related to the Cosmere that Brandon has written. Some of them can be quite odd, but in an interesting way, I guess. And Sixth of Dusk was a bit of an odd one, and that's why I remembered it very specifically. And I thought, I'm gonna reread the whole compendium at a later date anyway, so I might just put this down. And then we get to my Witcher DNF. I stopped reading at Baptism of Fire, and I wrote a spoiler review of why I put this down. Basically, it boils down to sexual assault of one of the characters, and apparently that is quite a prolific thing that occurs throughout the series. And so I'm like, I don't want to read about that. I thought this fantasy series was doing quite well in the beginning because it wasn't illustrating that form of abuse and torment to develop its female characters, and yet here we are, or here we ended up, and I'm not keen on that, so they left. I have unhauled them. And then for some miracle in May, which is my birthday month, I didn't DNF a book, didn't put down a book at all, so that was great. But then in June, I had a massive disappointment, which was The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. I thought this was going to be epic, like a pirate quest in a similar vein to The Live Ship Traders for Robin Hobb, who's an author that I obviously love. Like, her books are on my shelf behind me, and the cover of The Bone Ships is kind of reminiscent of Robin Hobb's Live Ship Traders cover. So I thought they've marketed it in a very similar way specifically because they think that readers of Hobb will jump over and read The Bone Ships. I'm on board, pun intended. And I tried it, I got 320 pages into it, and I'm like, this sucks because characters, I don't care about them. I'm not connected to anything. The world building could be better. The writing style feels very dry, and I just could not stand the pace. And so I thought, why am I reading this far to try and find a hook when the hook should have happened more than 200, 300 pages ago, and I am still here. Goodbye. Then in July, I put 2 books down, and one of them is by Brandon Sanderson, which is a very unusual surprise because I usually love his books, but this was the new Stephen Leeds book, Death and Faxes, and this just felt very off to me. It didn't feel like his tone, and I think he co-wrote it with somebody, but the more he comes out with co-written works, the more I'm like, not for me, because I just did not like the style of this book at all. I should have listened to a sample and I didn't. I just went out and got the audiobook, and I regret it because I did not like what was being set up there. I didn't like the character. I was so disappointed. And then we have another series that I have officially put down because I was hoping that this would be an awesome series. I enjoyed the first 2 books, but this book, again, just the pace hurt me. And that is Abaddon's Gate, which is the third Expanse book. And this is a very large scale sci-fi book where Jim Holden and his crew are in the midst and accidentally ignite what could become a planetary war. And they find out there's a virus and a whole bunch of other things ensue. And every book you get introduced additional characters to kind of flesh out the plot. And while that could be intriguing because I liked it in the first 2 books, in the third book, I did not care about the characters that were introduced. And I think I talked about it in my BookTubers Favorite Books video because I really wanted to like some of the books that other BookTubers I watch enjoy. But sometimes our tastes align and sometimes they just really deviate. And on this one, they really deviated because I did not like this at all. And I got 215 pages into it, which is 40%. So I got almost halfway and I was like, I need to put this down, because while I was reading this, I was putting off a whole bunch of other books and I was forcing myself to read it. And that is not a great thing to do because it puts you in a reading slump. Trust me when I say don't do that. And then in August, I put down 1 book, and I didn't finish this book for a reason that is different to everything else in this video. And Her Majesty's Royal Coven was the book that I put down in August. And I put this down after reading 20 pages because it is a urban fantasy. So it's about witches, but they're set in modern day, but they also aren't out to like public knowledge. So obviously they're a secret society or government agency, and there are 4 different characters, and you see them as their kids, and then you see them again as they're older, and you see the different dynamics, how they've changed and shifted this whole time. But when I started the book, I was like, I don't like this tone at all. And I think because I'd read Juno Dawson's work before, like Clean, Meat Market to name 2, I was like, I know I like her writing style, and the style and tone were not really the problem. I think it was just my headspace at the time because I knew that it would also be multiple perspective. So I put it down in August and then I finished it in November instead. So that is a book that I knew that I would probably revisit, and I don't often do that with DNFs, but for this DNF, it was kind of against a question mark in my head. I knew something wasn't right, and so I didn't get rid of it. I held onto it and I tried it again later. And that was very beneficial because I ended up really enjoying it. And then in September, I made the painful decision to DNF Iron Gold by Pierce Brown after I have read and adored, or reread and adored, Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morning Star by Pierce Brown. And in my mind, this book series is just a trilogy. I don't care about the extra characters that we get in Iron Gold. I was going to reread Dark Age as well, but after the cluster that was Iron Gold, I don't care anymore. Like, you can see kind of the facets of foreshadowing and the development of the world occurring and the politics, but I just do not give a flying crap anymore. I don't care. The beginning of the trilogy, epic. So action-packed, so charged with characters and emotion. Excellent. This series, no. So political, so unnecessary, such a slow pace, couldn't care, got rid of, not gonna do it again. Will reread the trilogy, won't touch Iron Gold. And then I tried a few booktuber favorites, and some of them were hits and some of them were not. One of those misses, which I didn't finish, was Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, and this was a science fiction book about the metaverse. And it started out with a delivery driver that is kind of disguised under this code name, and you don't really understand what is going on with the world. Like, it's incredibly different to what we would expect now, but it seems like people are using technology in a way that we kind of use it at the moment, but obviously in a very detrimental way. And that's when they are completely into VR to the point where they are abandoning the physical world. It was only just starting to get to the point, and the writing was very in your face, and it was a very deliberate way of doing it. So it's not like the writer was unaware that he was presenting his characters and his tone this way. He was doing it very deliberately, but it's not a style and tone that I like. And so while I can appreciate what the book was probably going to start doing, like, it has potential there, it's just not potential that I would find enjoyable. It's kind of why I don't read classics, because I know that while a lot of people love them, I just don't care about them and they feel dry. So they have a great execution, but I don't care, so I won't enjoy them. And so same with Snow Crash. I didn't care, I wasn't going to enjoy it, so I put it down. But I'm glad I at least tried something out of my comfort zone, because not always is it going to work, but at least I tried. And then I tried an ebook from my library for Gear Breakers, and this was a apocalyptic fantasy with giant mechanical robots that teenagers are rewired as cyborgs so that they can plug into and fight in them, because these two cities are at war. And the Gear Breakers are the characters that can climb into like the bottoms of these robots and obviously break gears and wires and everything and mess up the entire thing. The concept was really cool. I didn't care about the writing style, and that is why I borrowed it from my library, because it has absolutely zero consequences. I didn't spend any money. I borrowed it from my library. I read it as an ebook, the first like small percentage, and I thought, I don't care. And then I accidentally let it lapse. And that just shows you that I wasn't interested in reading it because I was distracted. So I accidentally returned it, but at least someone else wouldn't have to wait on hold and they could enjoy it instead. Now this book I actually finished, but I've DNF'd the series, so I thought why not include it here? And that is Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 initially. I'd probably give it a 3 now. And it's Norse inspired. I talked about this in a few other videos, so I will link my wrap up talking about Shadow of the Gods down below so that you don't have to listen to me rehash it all here. I did not love the ending as much as everybody else seems to have loved the ending, and I thought, okay, that's cool, but it's not enough to hook me into reading the next book. Like, you do you guys enjoy it, I'm not gonna bother. And then I've got 4 books that I didn't finish in November. The first one I was talking about in my Read It or Unhaul It vlog, where I tried a bunch of books to see if I would keep them or get rid of them, and clearly I decided to get rid of this one, and that is Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This was a book that, again, I read like 20 pages of, and I'm like, I do not like this. I'll link my Unhaul It vlog, Read It or Unhaul It vlog, because I go into more detail there, and I actually give a description of the synopsis. And then I made the hard choice of Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, which is a book that I will love and give 5 stars, but I was just not in the mood for it at all this year. And I think I gave myself Hero of Ages fatigue because I put it on so many TBR lists with the intent to get to it, but I just could not make the time to do it. I don't know why. I know that I'm going to enjoy it when I eventually pick it up, but I've officially removed it from my Goodreads currently reading page because I thought the longer it sits there and kind of looms over my current TBR, the longer I'm going to try and ignore it. And if it is just sitting there on its shelf minding its own business, I am more likely to go, actually, I am in the mood for this, and then pick it up again. So I recently finished The Lost Metal and adored it and did a spoiler vlog for it. I obviously loved this series, but I was just not feeling Hero of Ages. So I finally made the choice about 200 pages in to put it down. And this is not a permanent DNF by any means. So it's kind of similar to Her Majesty's Royal Coven. I'm going to pick it up again in the future, just not now. Then I was reading another ebook, and like Gear Breakers, I let this lapse and I forgot about it and I let it return itself, but I was actually enjoying this significantly more than Gear Breakers, and that is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And it's set in the 90s and it's in Texas or something, I think. And these women are part of a book club and they're reading about murder mysteries while also trying to maintain the lives of their families and keep their houses tidy and do all of the home admin and maintenance that feels invisible and effortless if you're not actually doing it yourself. And so they create this kind of little community with each other, and then someone comes to town that is a murderer or potentially a vampire, and they decide to solve this mystery by themselves. And I liked the tone, and I feel like it really captured that eerie vibe of when you're reading a horror book and you have to keep the lights on, otherwise you will crap your pants. It really captured that tone and I really enjoyed it, but then I just forgot about it because I got distracted by life and work and stuff. And my library returned it, and then there were people after me waiting for it, so I couldn't get it back. So I do really want to continue reading this, but maybe I'll get it on audiobook because I feel like the audiobook would be really enjoyable. And then we've got another book that I included in my Read It or Unhaul It vlog, and this was very pretentious. It is a memory called Empire. And I was reading this and going, am I just really stupid? Am I too dumb for this book? The way that it is wording everything seemed to include like 5 or 6 different descriptors for every subject. I'm like, is this necessary? I don't understand the terminology, and you've used like 5 different words intentionally to make me feel dumb. I skipped the entire prologue because that's what it was like, and then I read some of the first chapter, and the first couple of sentences I was like, I already feel like I'm doing a tailspin here. So much mental gymnastics. I'm like, no, and I got rid of it. And now we're in December, so the last 2 books, one of them is a graphic novel that I borrowed from a friend and just wasn't for me because I didn't care about the dynamic, and that was Breaks, and it's supposed to be 2 high school characters, and one is apparently responsible for the murder of the other, and we jump back in time to see what happened. But I think they are love interests, but they seem to be like a bully and victim dynamic at school. And I thought, I don't care about all of the characters that have been introduced. Everything was done very slapdash, and I'm like, the art style is okay, but I don't care about the storytelling, so I'm out. And then the final book is called In the Wake of the Gods. And I tried this because I was lent it by a work friend, but I did not like the writing style. I think it was self-published, and you can tell in terms of the fact that it needs a little bit more editing, in my opinion. It just didn't flow the way I wanted it to, even though the general premise I was enjoying, which is 2 characters that have never seen each other before. One is a peasant woman and the other is a soldier. And the peasant woman gets attacked because her city is being attacked during a war, and this soldier fights off her 3 attackers in an alley, and when both characters look at each other, they realize they have the exact same face, which is a really cool premise. And then one of them is like, I'm out of here, and legs it, so they don't discuss anything, and they're shot apart by some magical barrier against each other. So it is a cool premise, but I just wasn't interested in the writing style again, and I feel like I must be a very picky person when it comes to writing style. Like, you've either got me or you have not got me at all. Like, I'll give you 5 pages and then I'm done. Let me know down below if you have managed to put books down this year. Did you not finish any because you decided to DNF them? Let me know. I would love to know. DNFing is getting so much easier for me to do now that I'm doing it a lot more, and it means that I get to more things because I know that I am more interested in them. But that is the end of the video. I'm probably going to do another edition of the Read It or Unhaul It because that really helped cull my TBR pile. But because it's December, I didn't quite get around to it. So maybe later this month or early January, we'll see how it goes. Thank you again so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.